Thank you very much. I made the PowerPoint presentation, but it looks like it was not. Oh, okay, there it is. I wanted to look at mainly the challenges we face in prosecuting trafficking in persons cases. Most speakers really have already talked about the different definitions, so I may not necessarily follow what is in the PowerPoint, but like the introduction really talks about just generally what everybody has been talking about. In Uganda, we have a specific law to handle trafficking in persons cases, and that is the Trafficking in Persons Act, Prevention of Trafficking in Persons Act of 2009. That is where we charge mostly cases of trafficking in persons. The reason I am moving ahead is because I don't want to finish my 15 minutes before I get to the real challenges that we face. So there are different sections in the Prevention of Trafficking in Persons Act, and mainly we charge under those sections. Section 3 of that prescribes the offense of trafficking in persons. It's also important to note that in Uganda, the victim's consent is immaterial, so you cannot put that up as a defense that the victim actually had consented. That is immaterial in our act. So Uganda is a source. It's also a point of transit and destination for trafficking in persons, including both transnational trafficking and domestic trafficking. There is very limited systematic data on the prevalence of or prosecution of the trafficking in persons. The reason being is that, of course, the traffickers will try as much as possible to hide the offense, and also sometimes because like you can see the act is for 2009, like you'll find that people who are supposed to be charged with trafficking in persons are actually charged with offenses under the penal code, so that it is very hard to collect properly the data. But we are working on that. Like in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, we started under the International Crimes Division. We specifically have a team in charge of trafficking in persons cases. So that person will go around the country collecting data relating to trafficking in persons cases, such that in future we can have proper records. Recruiters, both licensed and unlicensed agencies, companies, and employee, the trafficking in persons cases normally are through licensed. We have recruiting agencies that are licensed, and then some are unlicensed. They're doing it like on the black market, so you find that the licensed agencies also go ahead and actually traffic these girls, and mostly it is girls, and especially to the Middle East. They will be taken as domestic workers, and then they will then be, turned into either prostitutes, or most of them have been killed. We have cases of bodies being brought back to Uganda, and it is so hard to trace, because you find that this girl was picked from Uganda, went through Malaba. That's a border between Uganda and Kenya. They reach Kenya, and there's no proper record of who actually took them to Kenya. So the only place where they took a plane from was Kenya. Remember, the girl is dead. There's no record of how it happened. So it becomes very hard to get the perpetrators. So that's a big challenge. The cases are prosecuted by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions under the International Crimes Division, like I had earlier said. There are high levels of youth unemployment in Uganda, because actually Uganda, majority of us in Uganda are youth, and the employment levels are so high. That is why it is so easy for the traffickers to convince these young people that they're creating for them jobs abroad, and it sounds very attractive, so they end up being trafficked, of course. The enforcement agencies have a challenge of identifying the real victims before they leave the country, because remember, we have the licensed agencies, so some of them are genuinely being taken, so it is very hard to, at the airport, for you to figure out that actually this person is being trafficked. Given the porous nature of our borders, like I had talked about earlier on, the Malaba border, we have a lot of business going on between Kenya and Uganda, and most of it is just, you just walk into Kenya and walk out, so it is very hard to be strict on cross-border cases. We lack specialized training. Even the prosecutors themselves, I think we've only trained maybe 10% of us, and cases happen all over the country. We have state attorneys all over the country, but only like 10% have been trained in trafficking in persons cases. So it is not easy to identify which case will fall under where, so that it is handled as either a trafficking in persons case or like any other case that falls under the penal code. And also we lack training needs that suit the current high technology, because they're just going to use like the internet, to support that, the trafficking in persons. And we need to, improve on the technology. The unwillingness of witnesses. You will have a witness come to court today, they wrote a statement at police saying this, and then when they come to you, you interview them, they're saying something different, or sometimes they have been compromised by the traffickers, or the traffickers have actually even threatened their families, so they will be unwilling to come and testify because of different reasons. And then the cases take too long. First of all, the investigations themselves are complex. So you find that if you've started investigating this case in January and by December you have not yet started prosecuting it, it becomes a challenge to make a follow-up. At the unnecessary delays with the communication and exchange of information, we have a problem of, we lack mutual legal assistance law to help us get this information from other countries. So it becomes difficult, because if we had that law in place, though we're working on it, there's a bill in place, we're hoping that our parliament can take it seriously and pass the bill so that it becomes law. Then it will make it easy to get the mutual legal assistance that we need from other countries. Limitations of capacity, of course, with finances in the Uganda police to carry out the investigations is another challenge that we face. Lack of stringent monitoring of foreign employment companies. You find that you issue a license to a company, but then again, you do not follow up to see how this company is operating. But just because they have a valid license, they operate in however manner they want, which has really made the problem, escalated the problem. Trafficking cases are not always prosecuted under the Prevention of Trafficking in Persons Act, because sometimes the charging persons are not aware of exactly where to place. So sometimes you find that the person is charged under the Penal Code Act, where the penalty is really light, and then it doesn't really deter the person from to become repeat offenders. And of course, under our Penal Code Act, it's easier to prove. So you find that me as a state attorney, I would prefer to charge maybe a case of, let's say, maybe defilement. If I find that this child has been taken from their home and they've been in the process of trafficking and all that, they have been sexually abused, so it becomes easier for me to just charge with defilement, because when I'm in court, it's very easy for me to call a few witnesses to prove the defilement, as opposed to the trafficking in persons. charge. I also looked at how we can help to curb the situation. We can have outreach programs to sensitize the population. We are in plans, like the ODPPs and plans with talks with government to ensure that we can have outreach programs. But of course, this has a financial implication, so the government has to fully support the program. Sensitization programs also, like you sensitize the officers, you know, because if a police officer can identify from the word go that this is a trafficking in persons case, they will investigate it differently. Like, they won't look at it as a simple case under the under the penal code. We need a better data management system. Though we have a data management system called Procamis, where we manage, like, computerize the information such that it is very easy for someone to get that information. But if you do not have someone feeding in that information, especially like I earlier told you that someone has not identified a case as a trafficking in persons case, then that means it's not going to be put in the system as a trafficking in persons case. So that data management needs to be improved. And the employment agencies need to be monitored and to ensure that actually they are not hiding under their license and trafficking young people. I thank you for listening to me.